You know, maybe none of us were going to get to grow up.
Very common. You want to talk about the Cyberpunk-Humanist wars?
Sure. So this guy, once upon a time, was a close observer of the cultural scene of our generation, and our generation is a pretty big. You know, well, we're baby boomers, so we're a very big generation, and so
we're the biggest.
We're the biggest, and we're the baddest, and we're not leaving, you guys. And so, yeah, there you go. So he was watching tracking the rise of a movement in science fiction called cyberpunk. And they, of course, had no problem promoting themselves, but they were promoting themselves against a group of people who really weren't as cohesive or didn't actually acknowledge that they were a group, but these cyberpunk folks decided to make a group out of them. So they were called the Humanists. But so Michael then took this kerfluffle, is what it basically was, big time by writing an essay that has been very influential, been reprinted many times, a user's guide to the postmoderns. And so it has pictures. If you go to the old issue of Asimov, there are pictures of a bunch of new writers like Bruce Sterling and Bill Gibson and Jim Kelly and John Kessel and Kim Stanley Robinson and Connie Willis and not Nancy Kress. You left her out.
I did. She's never let me forget that too.
But cleverly, but with a very interesting sleight of hand, he left himself out. And he figures right in here someplace, but because he is the ringmaster here, we don't actually see where he fits, although he puts everyone else in their place. So talk about that a little bit. Why did you do that?
I did it because there were a lot of really good writers doing really hot stories. And with the exception of Bill Gibson, none of them were getting any attention at all. There were all these fancy articles about, and they were far inferior writers.
Yes, those guys, yeah, right.
Nobody was writing about Jim Kelly. Nobody was writing about Kim Stanley Robinson. Nobody was writing about Connie Willis. And I said, these guys are all, is my generation. I said, these guys are all doing wonderful work. And I wrote this article essentially to get publicity for all of you because you deserved it. And at that time, Bruce Sterling had created the cyberpunk movement modeled after the pre-Raphaelites. It was done very deliberately. It chose half of the generation of their generation of writers, those that weren't their little circle of friends, and declared them the enemy. And they were sending out these manifestos and vicious personal attacks on half of them.
In a rag called Cheap Truth, which was anonymously published, but everyone knew it was, since Bruce Sterling's postmark was on it, everyone knew who was doing it. So.
Also, if you ever want to do this yourself, what they did that was very clever was they sent copies of this free to everybody they insulted.
Yes.
So, in order to build up emotions, and I said, I just want publicity for this, and I used the cyberpunks versus humanist war as a metaphor, and I tried to take it way over the top. I named you guys, by the way.
You did.
And when I defined all of this, when I carefully defined it so that the cyberpunks were everybody who's to the left of me, and then the humanists were everybody who were to the right of me, and right in the center at the point of absolute perfection.
Yeah, good move.
I did not think anybody could take this seriously. Oh my God. I had to stop answering the phone.
Yeah.
Marianne would answer the phone and she'd go, "It's Scott Card." You want to talk to him.
He wants to know why he's not in the article.
There were some amazing people wanting to know why they weren't in the article.
Right.
Some people who were like 40 years older than us wanted to know why they weren't in the article.
Right.
There were people who were really mad because I quoted them correctly in the article. I will not mention his name, but I wrote to all you guys and I said, would you write me something that I can quote in the article about what your artistic intentions are?
Right.
And then I use those quotes in the article. And one person was very mad at me for quoting him correctly. So, Orson Scott Card very kindly offered to give me space. He wrote an essay refuting me entirely, and then he called me up and very kindly offered as much space as I wanted in his fanzine to refute him back, and said, "Gee, Scott, I don't have any complaints about what you said." Because you never pick an argument with somebody who buys ink by the barrel.
And so what you did here was control the discourse about this, and which was very clever on your part, but also it did set an agenda for critical attention so that not everyone's, but people who thought seriously about the genre stopped looking over here where maybe some writers were doing way better commercially than this group of postmoderns, but then looked over here and say, well, this is the cutting edge was the term was thrown around, shamelessly in this article. And so if you wanted the cutting edge, whatever that meant, you had to look at these guys. And those guys over there are saying, but we outsell these guys 10 to 1. What is it about these guys? And we could talk about these guys here, but many of these guys would be footnotes to you. And isn't this always the case that many times the most popular, the great bestsellers of 1890 are people you've never heard of. And go try going down the Nobel Prize list from the 20s. A lot of people who are never read anymore. But the
important thing was that every story that I mentioned in that essay was a really good story, and still is. And it's like being a teenager and listening to rock and roll on the radio. You know that Paint It Black is good, and you know that the Herman's Hermits are not very good. A 30-year-old can't pick that up. They're too old.
Right.
So, I was right there. I was writing. I was looking around to see who were the best people writing, and it was clear to me artistically who was doing the hot work. And I think I'm absolutely right on that. With the exception of Nancy Kress, I didn't miss anybody. Nancy Kress would have gotten in there if, when I asked you guys who were your peers, one of you had mentioned her. And she would have...
Oh, yeah, blame us right over Nancy, that's not true. I mentioned you.
You mentioned John Kessel.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And she would have gotten in there if it hadn't been for the fact that I had just read her big fantasy novel,
right.
Golden Bells. So I was thinking it was a fantasy
The Prince of
writer.
Golden Bells, right, yeah.
So
good. We're about 22.